I'm surprised at I'm really truly surprised at the amount of press that this has gotten.
Dude,
Um,
I looked up I was talking to Rishi. Apparently, we're like the most trending thing in esports in a really long time.
100%. Yeah, but you know what? Like that could not have possibly gone better for ECI.
Yeah,
Like even though some of the perception, a lot of the perception is, which we'll talk about today, is negative. The actual fact of the matter is, like, I would take that any day over not being on the map at all.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
look, this is going to be the best way to prove out whether or not all press is good press. I don't know the answer. I think candidly for me, the thing that I'm most upset about is
yeah,
just sort of the flack that the advisory board members are getting. Right,
yeah.
like that's like they know what's happening behind the scenes, right? I think Frank said he talked to you, so you know a little bit about it already. But like, it's just it must. I feel so bad, right? Because it's
Mhm.
easy for me to be like, look, I believe in this. Shit. I've been working on it for a year, right? Like, it's I think much harder for people who haven't been in the weeds the last year to like have that same opinion and feeling. You know what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah. I understand it. Like, I think, that's a very appropriate thing for you to feel like that. Okay. Like, yeah, the advisors, most of all, I think this will go a long way. And I'm really glad you wanted to do this so quickly, to clear it up and also like to kind of cover that. We should probably start. I never do this. So like, we should probably start with like who you are and like introductions and everything, like all that boring shit. Um, like,
Yeah, man, I'm good.
but with you in particular, your history is actually really impressive, and I think lends credibility. So that, yeah, we should start there.
Sure. Just want me to just jump into it?
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it. Like,
Hey, yeah. My name is Sebastian Park. I do a lot of fun things, but the things that we're working on right now is the Esports Certification Institute. My background: I'm the son of immigrants, born and raised in Los Angeles. Went to public school my entire life before getting a real good chance to go to university out east. Subsequently, I worked in esports for the last 8-ish years, right? So helped cross-compiler games, right? So started in the game industry as a games cross-compiler from iOS to Android before running user acquisition and sponsorships and Namecheap and running their esports sponsorships. And then ran a couple of esports team, ran Team Archon back in 2015, and then Clutch Gaming and the VP of the Houston Rockets for a while. We sold that to Dignitas and the 76ers, which is always a ton of fun, back in 2019. Most recently, I'm a venture partner at Bitcraft, trying to invest into the next generation of esports people and esports things, and that also just ECI, trying to help new people come into the space as well.
dang, we have that Dignitas crossover, though.
Yeah, man, that's a throwback.
It looked a lot different when I was with it than it did with the 76ers, man. Like Odie and the like the OG, we had this like team house back in, I think it was Long Beach. And like we're chilling with like I'm a cutie pie, like Scara in the house, and like I swear we lived in there for like a year or two, and you could still find like hairs from cutie pie,
Oh man,
like years later, just everywhere. It was
yeah.
a trip, man.
It was. I
That
mean,
was
it's funny because I
mm,
think people forget that the origins of esports houses, right? Because I lived in one in Plano. I lived in one in Las Vegas way back when,
yeah,
and those were there because we couldn't afford housing. Like we weren't.
yep.
Nobody was paying themselves enough money, and like I'm sure you remember this, man. Just like your credit card, you've maxed out. You're waiting for G Fuel or whoever who owes you some money, and they're like, "Yo, that money's coming in the wire, guys. That money's coming in the wire." And it's like December 29th, and you're like, "Guys, we got like one business day left. If it doesn't hit, I owe tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt, right?" Like,
it was
um,
it was also like you just there was no like M&A and disclosures. Like I remember when we sold to the Garden, like at
mm,
CLG, like they like when we got into the boardroom with the lawyers for the disclosures, they're just like their mouths open. They're like, "What do you mean?" Like they were literally asking questions like, "Do you have any bodies buried?" Like we're like, "Yeah, like a couple cats in the backyard, like a few." Like they're like, "Wait, what the hell?" Like it's just a totally different thing that we're like nowadays. Like if you were to envision like the original like 2014 team house, that just
mhm.
cannot exist in any universe of like workers compliance or insurance or anything. It's is a totally different universe.
And it shouldn't exist, by the way. As just to be completely clear,
should,
like it should not exist as well.
Yeah, the world that we come from it's good that we move forward. Yeah,
right. And I think about that all the time because I think a lot of my friends and colleagues, and I'm sure you as well, like people who've been in space for a while, they have fond memories because we were just younger. We were like in our 20s and we were having fun and we're trying to make an industry work and we're all broke drinking beer and eating pizza all the time, right? Like those weren't good days, right? Those were days that perpetuate a lot of sort of the negativity and sort of the downstream effects that we still deal with today. Am I glad to have done it? Yeah, for sure. You can't take that away from me. That's part of who I am, and I'm happy to have spent every moment of it. But man, that stuff is. I'm glad it's on the way out, if not already out.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I kind of like have nostalgia for particularly like the way that tournaments and like esports events ran back then, like particularly like and you still see this sometimes like at FGC where like there are the chairs are right up against the screen, and when there's like when there's some big play, like everybody jumps up and down, everybody goes crazy. It's a huge thing. Like, I love that gas is amazing, and sometimes we like, especially in like the formalized like franchise tournaments, we become much more official. It's like applause sign, like everybody stands up and like,
right. We don't have those dream hacks where 6 different events are back to back with each other, and someone's cheering and you're not sure if it's Heroes of Newerth or
or whatever else,
like whatever else was out there.
League of Legends is at PAX, right? Like you're you're at Seattle and you're going off the floor to catch. It's a different world. But I guess that's why you've created this, right? Is that you are kind of building, and I guess I'm going to spill all my cats out of the bag right now,
please,
and say that I am enormously positive on ECI, despite many of the industry people that I will openly and gladly disagree with it. And like it's a Devin Nash special event when everybody comes out with something that has like a certain take on something, and I'm like, oh, let's go. Like I think I know something about it, like a context. And this is one of those things where like I'm so glad to talk to you because I really think that ECI is a good idea, particularly with the board that you've set up for it. Because I think it's a total false start if the board as it's presented right now wasn't there, and some guy from like crypto adjacent dude that like comes in is like, hey, you guys want an esports certificate, but like you setting up the heavy hitters that you have, many of them who I can personally vouch for and have worked with for years. I think we can like start there with like a esports certification is only as legitimate as other people believe it to be. So having people like that on the board to support it is very good and was a super good move by you. But yeah, sorry, that's like 20 things. Set up ECI for the future, right?
I mean, I think there are 2 things about ECI that I think are important to put out there, right? One is that this isn't a 1 day, 1 month, 1 year project for anyone. This isn't like we all have jobs, right? Like we all do things for our full-time income where it's not venture backed, right? It's mostly, not only my money, but also just money of people in the community, right? Like it's something we just believe in because frankly, we haven't seen the quality of awesome people and representation in the space increase over the last few years at the same rate as investment money has come into the space, right? Like you wanted to say that in the last 4 years, hey, I want to say, and that's not to say we haven't gotten some great people, right? Like, especially at the executive level, I think people like the 100 Thieves folks, right? Like Jackson Dahl and John Robinson, those guys, great people. And you see all these other organizations bringing great people from outside of esports. But the thing that we haven't really seen that we really want to see more of is you don't see the Brandon Schneider story, right? You don't see the guy, Brandon Schneider, for those of you who don't know, is the soon-to-be president of the Golden State Warriors. That dude joined the Warriors when he was 20, and he's like 40 now, and he's going to be president, right? Like that is a type of talent and good people we want to find. And then, frankly, in terms of like how this thing came together, right? We were just like catching up with some people in the space, and we're just like, hey, how many applications do you get every time you have like a team manager position open
Hundreds.
up? How many? Hundreds, like thousands. And like, do you read them all? And the honest answer is no.
Can't.
I don't, right? Like I read the ones that are sent to me, but like what's filtering those out? Like, do I care about what college they went to? No. Do I care about that they went to college? No, right? Like, and so we were seeing all these things. And so this is sort of the fun like dichotomy of what we're seeing out on Twitter versus sort of the ideation of it all. It was like, hey, like, how do we solve for that problem? How do we solve for like these like incredibly specific entry level business roles that aren't talent, that aren't writing, that aren't computer science? Like, how do you solve for helping people who are exceptional, outstanding, people from different walks of life show up on that radar?
Yeah. I can I tell you like what I think the number one misunderstanding is? Because I also tweeted this, which means that all the people on Twitter are going to be here, and so it's a whole thing.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Like, okay, I think the biggest problem, and I might use Notepad to kind of just guide my thoughts on this, but it's like I think the biggest problem is that most of the people that are criticizing this are doing so from a relatively narrow scope. They're thinking about it in terms of applying for a job with a team, with an esports team. So let's take a team like TSM, or I guess I'll take a team like CLG, where at CLG, before we sold the Madison Square Garden, we had 107 positions. The vast majority of those positions I hired for personally. Okay, I was about an average of 250 applications, though sometimes as many as 500 for me to actually go
per position.
Per position,
right.
Yeah, per position. And this was anything from esports directors at a high level to like the analysts, right? Like contracted analysts that we would do like tertiary. So if you're looking at esports teams, I actually don't think that a certification like this, that the target demographic is people that are trying to apply for esports teams. And this is one of the things that kind of tilts me about when we think about esports, we think about jobs and positions that exist in the context of an esports team. But that's very little of what actually happens within esports. There's Epic Games, there's Riot, which employs thousands of people. There's tertiary or industries like lawyers, CPAs, right? I would love to be able to vet a CPA that has an esports certification to let me know that their financial institution actually understands a little bit about the game and can do the tertiary service, right? That to me is like much more realistically the use case for this. Is like you get an esports certification as an add-on to applying to a game development role for Overwatch 2, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's in terms of use cases, that's one of them for sure. Like I want to be clear that really what it's for, regardless of company and role, I think it's almost easier to describe what it's not for, right? It's not for talent, right? Yeah. It's not for engineers. It's not for people who are doing very specific roles that have very specific requirements, right? It's for all the roles that you discussed and I've discussed around, hey, here are roles that are frankly a little open-ended. They're opaque as to like what they're supposed to be a lot of the times. And they're at all these organizations that you just really don't know how people have gotten those jobs there, right? And I think part of it, by the way, is when people think about ECI and some of the messaging that we saw out there, is like people, are like, oh, we're super anti-gatekeeping. And I'm like, yes, I agree. Like gatekeeping sucks. Like that's not the point of this thing. The point of this thing is if you're someone who doesn't have the traditional access of working hard and getting there, that you can have a chance to go through some other means, right?
Well, yeah, on that point, because I think that's really important. That's the number one criticism I see is that people are like, this is going to gatekeep people out of the industry. And the way that they're thinking about it is you would, in this theoretical world where let's say that we completely got all these brands on board with like evaluating this, that you would need a certification in order to get a job in esports. This will never happen.
Yeah.
This will never happen. You do not need a Cisco certification to get a job in networking. You do not need MSCE certification to get a job at Microsoft. There are a million. This is an add-on, and that's
right. If you're, it's an add-on to your resume. Yes. It's an add-on to trying to let people know, hey, like in this pool of thousands of people applying, you've taken the extra step, right? I think some of the other company ideas are really funny and sort of applicable here, where yeah, like look, if you have 5 years of experience working as a comms producer or like as a salesperson, and you've done experience in this role, like Will the ECI certification help you out get another job in esports? No, right? Like at that experience level, you already know if you're a decent salesperson, like you already know all these people, right? You already know the people you need to talk to. You already know generally what the next steps ought to be to find that role. If you are, let's say, 24 years old, right? You're like, you went to university for like, I don't know, philosophy or something like that. You graduate, you got a sales job out of college, doing inside sales, business sales for like a pharmaceutical company. And now you're like, hey, but I really love esports and I want to work in esports. And how the heck do I get out there? You can try going out and meeting people and reaching out to people. And I think if you were to reach out to a lot of the folks on the advisory board and myself, like we'd certainly respond. We certainly want to talk. But there's still not a great way for you to stand out for that entry-level role as like an entry-level salesperson, right?
100%.
You got to somehow get through that stack. And what we end up seeing, by the way, and this is sort of like the unsaid thing, is when people say stuff like, hey, you just work hard and good things happen to you, and you see job application pickers say, hey, we pick all our candidates by ourselves with no process, oftentimes, statistically speaking, more often than not, it's people who are like them, right? It's people who have similar backgrounds to them. It's people who they jive with. It's people who, you know, they partied with one thing or another. And as a result, we end up sort of ironically gatekeeping out a bunch of people who aren't us, right? Who aren't the people who are like hanging out with us, aren't partying with us, aren't doing these things. And that's not okay, right?
Yep.
And I'm not saying, I want to be clear, no one's saying this is perfect. Certifications, standardizations, all these things have a lot of problems. But the research is clear. There are downstream negative effects to the implicit bias of other things as well, right? And the goal and hope is like, hey, let's start taking a stab at this. Let's take one step forward and see if we can solve this over in the next 5 to 10 years. If we can do that, that'd be awesome.
That's yeah. I think it's really important what you touched on is like how people actually get into this industry, because most people don't. Like in my mind, there's really 2 main ways that people get in. I think number 1 is just plain nepotism, and this is something that like as an OG yourself, like you just know, right? That's like there's such a huge percentage of people that esports is a boys club in a way, and it's like, do you go to the parties? Do you end up at the right events? Do you talk to the right people? And it's like, and then the second way is just like born, okay, I'm George, I'm Reginald, I'm just doggy dog. I've like ascended from the Spartan 300, just like slaying people like to get to my throne, and now I'm like
your portfolio is so amazing that like it's just impossible to ignore.
And you have just years of experience because you literally like grew up with like a freaking CRT in a basement, like playing a game, right? And so like let's take those 2 things against like what we're now seeing. Like the ecosystem has changed years later. Now there is a huge number of people in college who I can tell you from the hundreds, and I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of emails I get every single month from people that are like, I'm just coming out of college. I have no idea what to do. I don't even know where to start. I don't know who to talk to. If I go to an event like I'd stand around. I don't know who's important. I don't know anything. Would you give me any advice? And I've made videos about this, like tried to like give people direction, but I have called for something like a certification for so long because there just is no way to make you to show that you've got skin in the game and stand out. Like if you just send your application into some random esports team, like with the amount of applications that we receive, got no shot.
Yeah, you know? and that's so I don't. Tanasi Coast does this great thing where he says, hey, you know, especially if you're an activist and especially if you're trying to make a difference on the ground, you have to have faith that what you're doing matters and what it works. And so I really appreciate the feedback, especially from the very thoughtful people who've, you know, sent me studies that, you know, I've been very fortunate enough to read as a function of working with some of the scholastic people we've worked with on this certification around like, hey, standardization, the positives and negatives about it, the history of meritocracy in America and whatnot. I can't begin to like, you know, extol the like happiness / luck I had getting into esports, right? Like,
yeah, same.
It was, and I think that's true for almost everyone who's gotten in.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's something that I feel so strongly that, hey, like we all got very lucky. I really want the next generation of people not to have to get that lucky.
Exactly. Yes.
Right. Like
we feel that way because those positions are so limited.
Right.
And esports needs to change in order to be able to incorporate all of these people who want to have a position in it.
Yeah.
They can't get that. Like it's 1 in a billion that I like. Crumbs came into my chat and was like, "Hey, we're looking for like a League of Legends guy who can help our players get like better mental." And I'm like, "Sure, I'll fly to Los Angeles, sleep on your couch, and do that." Like, it's an insane, like astronomical freaking thing, right? Like like, if we're ever going to put if there has to be a pipeline if we're ever going to make this like an actual legitimate industry.
And yeah, I agree with that.
Mhm.
And it's if you're already in, you're fine,
Yeah.
right? Like, congratulations,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Mm.
I really want to tell people, hey, like, this might come across as facetious, but I'm really saying, like, man, like, you've won a personal happiness lottery if you're in these sports, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've somehow managed in a sea of people to get noticed and create some really cool stuff and become a member of this industry. Hell yeah, right?
Mhm.
I just really want to make sure that we have more paths for people who aren't the like typical go to an event, meet people, network on social media people who,
Yeah.
have different backgrounds, right? Who don't drink, for example, who don't want to go to events, who, may not have the resources to go to events, frankly. The people who like are stuck in cities or in towns or countries where there aren't large instances of this, right? One of my favorite people I ever worked with is a guy named Empire Nasser, who is in Kuwait, and he's like by far one of the best league analysts I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
And he's in Kuwait, like he's in the middle of the Middle East, like literally the middle of the Middle East. And so, but that was just luck, I think, in a lot of ways. And we just want to, and not that Nasser and his role is a good example of this, because he's far more like specific esports competitive person. I think that's different funnel, but. Yeah, no, I think ECI and what we're trying to do, especially with this first version of certification, is just that. The first version, the first step, trying to get towards a place where we're happy with what we have.
What's your vision for building this out? Like what do you want to do with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think in an ideal world, if it generates a Brandon Schneider in the next 20 years, that's a success. I think the first real step is we're focused on making sure that first certification test is great. We want to make sure that the first group of people who take the test and come out and pass the test are awesome A+ people. We want to prove to the companies and to the industry and to ourselves that, hey, this process will help us find better people and help us find good people who we can help to survive and set up for success.
And how do you add legitimacy to that? So I feel like ECI's job is, and this is kind of a lot of weight to carry, but it's just the reality of the business you're in. Like, your job is as much to make people come out of that are excellent as it is to convince the brands and the companies on the other side hiring them that this is a legitimate thing.
Right.
How do you add that legitimacy?
Part of it, honestly, is it's an iterative and hard question to answer, right? I think that's some of the funnier things here, which is we've talked to these brands and teams and companies already, right? We're talking to their hiring managers. We're talking to their recruiters. It's funny, a lot of people say, hey, like, what's up with math? There are a lot of people who don't know the answer to some of those math questions, and that was something that came to us by one of the like game publishers we talked to, right? They're like, hey, like, we just sort of need someone to understand statistical literacy a little bit better. By the way, there are some huge things we got to change, and we're actually making massive wholesale changes to the like quantitative section, such that
Thank God.
It reflects.
Yeah.
So that reflects more like, hey, like the types of numbers you'll see on Twitch and Twitter that you need to know about to operate properly. But like, yeah,
that was one of my minor criticisms. Like, I was one of my criticisms, and I put that in a video just as like there's these statistical analysis questions that are like, determine the coefficient of the XCOM 2 standard deviation of the 5-2, and I'm like, dude, I never need to know this. Like,
that was a little too over the top, and that was on us for sure.
For sure,
that was definitely on us. Not what we wanted to do necessarily. We just wanted to make sure that. And by the way, that's why we're so happy to have announced this certification, right? And I know people, a lot of my friends have been calling me, being like, "Hey, you okay?" I'm like, "No, this is actually really good." Like, we would not have known that feedback. We've literally only been talking to academics about this for like 6 to 9 months, right? We're talking to academics about this, and so yes, our math test became super mathy.
Yeah.
And so we got to probably like draw it back out. So we're hearing that feedback loud and clear, but that's part of it. The test is comprised of things that we've talked to people and we've worked with companies, be like, hey, what are you looking for? Please help us out to like set this aside and we'll go from there. Subsequently, I think it's just a question of we're going to do a lot of membership training afterwards, right? Like we haven't talked about this a lot, but once we know that you have a base of knowledge and understanding and you've passed the certification, we want to work with you, right? We want to help you with like understanding just better, like here's how you interview, here's how you reach out, here's like standard like resume and cover letter stuff.
Yeah. And there's a lot of potential ways that you could, I guess, for lack of a better word, coach people, like to be able to be able to that end, like, okay, like let's do something on like networking. Can you guys, can someone from the lab link a copy of the PDF, please, in the chat? And I'll pull it up just to go over some of the questions, because I don't want everybody to think that the questions are only oriented towards like statistical analysis or things like that. There's a lot of questions that I thought got submitted that were actually really good, that I think would demonstrate a sort of extraordinary knowledge of esports, in the sense that like specific details of like how a team gets monetized, and like what would like what are the main ways that they get monetized, or things like how leagues are structured, stuff like that. Yeah.
And by the way, a lot of our questions, by the way, were generated from our advisory board, right? Like we asked every member of the advisory board to submit 10 questions per test cycle. And we're using a lot of our own internal analytics to be like, hey, like what questions are good? What questions are, getting the right answer? Are some questions too tricky? And we're getting a lot of feedback on those questions. And frankly, I think the esports comprehension section is pretty good. Like
I think so too.
We're pretty happy. We're pretty happy with that one. I think it's just the other two. I think the other one that we want to make some iterations on is I don't think we were clear enough that we don't care about how good of a writer you are. We just want to understand that you can problem solve. And so we're working on. We're back in the lab on that one as well, and so we'll have something done there.
Yeah, I think it's so hard to release something to the public, because everybody like. And this is another thing that I explained in my original talk about this, which is going up after this talk, like, which is like, this is an MVP, right? Like this is the first iteration of this idea, which you're developing over the next 5 to 10 years. Like so I think to some level, every CEO has to make this decision of like, are you going to release something, or are you going to keep iterating on it? And there's like a product timeline where you could have worked another year on this, right, and you would have ended up somewhere else. But there's industry considerations, there's budget considerations, there's venture capital considerations. Yeah. People just see like what you've got, and they don't think it's like, and the truth is like most products look really terrible. Not saying that yours does. When they come out the door, just look at Twitch, right? Like the vast majority of stuff that Twitch has released is total dog shit, and then most of it stays that way. But a lot of it develops into better things over time because people reiterate on it and make it better. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And we're hopeful in that regard, and much love to the people who are working on it and all that jazz. Like we want to get better. We're actively listening to feedback. I know we're not able to respond to everyone. We tried at first, and then it hit the exponential point where there were like 1,000 responses per minute, and we're like, okay, I guess we can't respond to everything. But
it's a truly insane amount of feedback, I'm sure, at this point.
Oh yeah, it's been a lot.
But you wouldn't have, you wouldn't have gotten that, Sebastian, if you didn't build equity in the way that you did with the industry. And that like, I think, and that's why I said like almost the first thing I said to you was like, I would way rather have had a, there's a universe where like 30 people are trying to do this, and they're all like vying for, like different authorities and people to make their certification program, like the one. So for you to like assemble like essentially the Justice League of esports, and I want to like just from my personal vouch on many of these people. These are heavy hitting people in esports. I'm pulling up the list right now. Many of them who I've worked with personally for years, right? Josh Swartz was one of the fundamental people who helped the sale of CLG to Madison Square Garden through Catalyst. Nicole's the CEO of Evil Geniuses, for example. I think we've got people from C9 in here, or several people from C9. There's literally every single one of these people in their own right is an industry leader. And importantly, they are not people whose primary job is to make money off of an esports certification. They've got stuff they're doing. You know, we've got Lauren, Primo, and Frank, like the respective heads of Corsair Gaming. These are this is so important to get this kind of team behind you, because if esports certifications are going to be a thing, there needs to be a heavy hitter that just is the authority on that. We can't be competing and muddling through and stuff, trying to convince brands that this is important or this is important. It just needs to be a single unified push. And the number one complaint I have about esports is nothing is a single unified push. It's like teams are trying to start a league, or we're all trying to get a union, but like half the players can't wake up before 4 p.m. Like, it's just a whole thing. So like, this is the first thing I've ever seen that esports came together and did. And I'm like, oh my God, it's so neat. You know, like, thank God we did something together.
Yeah, I'm really thankful I'm really thankful to everyone for chipping in their time and energy and through all of this, honestly, right? I think at the end of the day, the thing that brought people together was just, hey, like, this is a vision, right? Like, we're like, there's this fun idea that like people are gonna be making money from this. It's just not quite happen, you know? Like, it's just not like there's like it's going to be.
People are so silly. It's like you take out, like, let's say even you get like 1,000 people to pay full price for this, right? It's like, that's not even going to cover your overhead, like the amount, like the marketing, the partnerships, the time that you got to take. Like, people, yeah, this is a business, because you're working on both the direct to customer side and you're working on B2B. You're establishing relationships at the same time as establishing relationships with customers. Your overhead is massive. Yeah, right. Like, there's not that much money that's going to be coming out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think also like there are some like. And I think this is something that we're going to talk more about in the coming days and weeks. And this is something we definitely messed up. We should have been like super upfront about this, right? Like, the certification's not designed for people to be paying full price on, right? That's just like not the design of it, right? The design of the certification is to have scholarships and fee waivers and pay what you can afford. Like, I'm a huge, a bunch of the top 20 universities in the United States switched this model in about 2009. Yeah. Which was the idea that, hey, instead of doing scholarships, instead of doing like merit-based stuff, let's just purely do need-based financial grants, right? Let's like figure out a way to approximate like how much money you need and just give it to you so that it's no longer a factor in your decision-making. And that's our goal. Like, we want to make sure that, ECI, especially with the certification, and when we go to like that, if you can't afford it, pay whichever you can afford, right? And fee waivers or scholarships or whatnot. And so that, I think we messed up. We were going to announce that actually on Thursday. Like, that was part of our like rollout, was like we would like focus on our our advisory board on Tuesday. We'd spend Wednesday taking a deep breath and responding to interesting feedback. Yeah. And then we spent Thursday announcing the fact, hey, like, we actually have this thing pre-funded for like 100 scholarships and fee waivers, I think. And increasing, because there's some really awesome people who are buying up on the study guides, right? And there actually are. It's been awesome to see the people who are like, you can buy the study guide for free, right? Like, and you can just share the PDF. But people, if you truly believe in it, we appreciate you, paying what you can afford for it. Yeah. And because of that, we're already going to be able to, I think on last count, pay for like at least another dozen exams, right? If not more. So we're really excited about that. But we should probably like with that. Like, that was our mistake.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like, and this was like one of the main criticisms that I think came off of very legitimate people in the industry, like Jacob Wolf, right? That were just like, I feel like the communication could have been way better on launch. You're not the first nor the last company to make that mistake. And I appreciate your consciousness of it. And I do agree that like, going forward, like, your challenge now will be, showing why this certification at its, so I have like a real hot take on this that I'll be like very clear. Like, I am not Sebastian I have not talked to Sebastian about this, so this is my opinion personally. Okay. I'm completely cool with a $400 price tag, and then like maybe at a collegiate level scholastic partnerships with those universities to lower that burden, particularly because if you look at the cost of textbooks, you look at let's talk about the cost of an esports degree. Okay, that's 4 years in college. I've made videos before about esports degrees, and like you could probably show up to my door with an esports degree for the agency I run now, which we're aggressively hiring for all the time. And I would probably laugh that person out of the office. I mean, it's just, it depends, but like I just don't think that collegiate is at the level right now where they can accurately convey what is needed to get the skill. It's just so old fashioned. So many of the universities, not all of them, but so many of them are very behind on this. So establishing a private board of people who are in the know, that are working in esports every day, that can develop these questions. Because Sebastian very importantly mentioned that every advisor is submitting questions. He said that earlier. So knowing that, like, we have actual questions from that are appearing on this exam coming from people that are in the industry working on it right now, and so I would actually be okay with a $400 price tag, full stop, which is a hot take, because I feel like
that is a hot take.
It is, yeah, but here's why. Okay, it shows that you have skin in the game, and I want to see that. Like if I have 200 applications, I would love to know that somebody was like, look, I'm interested. Because like, dude, I can't tell you how many applications I got. They're like, hey, hi Team Liquid, I'm really interested in joining your, and they didn't even bother to copy and paste Counterlogic Gaming or Dignitas onto the email. They just shot it off, right? And it's like this person just has like zero skin in the game, right? They're just like not even invested, you know?
Yeah. I hear you. I hear that sentiment. I think it's an interesting take. This is going to sound weird. Yeah. I disagree with the idea that. It's good that you disagree. I just think that like that's not the type of skin in the game we want. We want to really make sure we find people, and this is something that we're planning on announcing sooner than that, but we'll coming soon to a tweet near you. You know, a lot of what we're trying to figure out is how do you identify these people who are truly in need and who are underrepresented and underprivileged? How do you find those without voices, right? It's actually a harder problem than people think, right? Like it's actually objectively hard to find people who are not seen, right? Right. And so we know there are a lot of communities like this. I mean, candidly, I could have never afforded this as a kid. Right, there was just no way we could afford it as a family, this type of thing, right? I've been very lucky in the last 10 years, and so I can afford it now, but could not afford it back then. And so we're very cognizant of that. That's why we're partnering with organizations, with institutions, with people who are able to provide that sort of filter, right? It's like, hey, like you have some great people in your funnel, you have some great people at your school, you have some great people in your program, your after school program. You have some great people who just have been tweeting at you and who you're like, hey, this person's like really showing initiative in this way or that way, or they wrote a really interesting article. We want to empower those people to be like, hey, these are the types of people who should get the certification. In the meantime, and part of the reason why we haven't announced it fully, it's like we have a scholarships page. You send us an email and we'll read every single one, and then we'll shoot it around and see if we can figure out a way to get you a scholarship. And
cool.
We already have 100 pre-done, right? So 100 and counting. So we're really excited about getting people who are in need and who, where this would be a financial burden for them, a fee waiver or a scholarship for the entire thing. So, because we know their skin in the game in that sense isn't the money as much. It's like, hey,
the effort,
your effort,
like
the type of stuff
just as much.
In. Exactly. And so that's sort of the thing that got a little bit lost, I think. And that's on us. We needed to message that earlier, more properly. We really did take the approach. We knew that feedback would probably be mixed, right? We didn't think it would, control the Twitterverse for 48 hours. So this was a fun launch learning for us for sure.
So I didn't know your time frame for how long you have. So I'm gonna switch to super macro and just ask you a bunch of questions. Is that okay?
Let's go, man.
Yeah. So like, what are your key focuses and challenges going forward for the next 6 months that you work on this project?
Yeah, so the first 6 months are going to be purely about let's make sure we administer the test, that it's done fairly, properly proctored. We've invested a lot into digital proctoring. We've invested a lot into trying to understand that there's no cheating, that everything's properly done, everything's graded fairly, without bias, all that jazz. Once we have the list of people who succeeded, then the next few months is, hey, making sure that they're prepared for the workforce, and then starting to iterate on our learnings from the previous exam. So the next 6 months really, and I think the last bit that's probably worth mentioning is we're looking to expand the advisory board long term, right? Like the entire entity is created and formed in a way such that we want to make sure if there are voices we don't have involved, we want to get them involved, right? We were really explicit and deliberate about the type of people we reached out to, who we thought were both leaders and thoughtful about the space, but we certainly missed a bunch of people. There's a bunch of people who we reached out to but didn't hear back from. There's a bunch of people we reached out to, and they were busy at the time. We're trying to get some more people in because we want more voices. We want more understanding of the certification and more feedback. So that's, I think, the next 6 months. Add on to that, we gotta spend probably a little bit more time, and by a little bit more time, I mean a lot more time on messaging and being transparent with everyone, so that they understand like this is what we're about.
What do you want to tell people? Because like this not I'm not trying to tooth the horn here, but like this is a big enough platform with this issue that like I think this will get into the conversation. Like what is it that you want to tell people that you wish was sort of part of the ethos of your launch?
Yeah, I mean, I think three main things, right? One, what we're trying to do is we are trying very hard to provide different avenues, non-traditional hustle avenues for people to get into esports. That's by far what we're trying to do. It's not trying to put up artificial walls. It's not trying to pole vault between left, right, and center. It's trying to provide that type of professionalism and semblance of meritocracy so that we can like really help the esports industry grow. Two, in terms of pricing, like, there's a reason why we're a public benefit corporation. There's a reason why we have a lot of stuff on the pay what you can afford model. There's a reason why we're working on trying to get fee waivers and scholarships for everyone. Please, we should have been upfront about that from day zero. And by day zero, I mean yesterday. And so yeah, completely off. We definitely want to get that across. The third thing, which is sort of fun, is if you're talent, if you're a content creator, a pro gamer, or a coach, this is not for you, right? Like this is not for your like esports or talent competitive organization people. This test cannot possibly help you make you a better League of Legends player, right? Like it's just not going to work that way. And so, especially for any of the people out there who've misunderstood that, let us know. We're issuing full refunds to everyone. We're just want to make sure that we didn't lead anyone astray. We needed to be more concise with who we were talking about. When we said entry level, it didn't get across well enough. It's not a certification that everyone in the industry needs to have to work in the industry. It's specifically trying to provide specific routes for people who don't have the traditional ways to get in, because they're not the crazy like I was going to insert like who's like the old school faker / like J-dongs of the world, right? Like we're trying. That's part of the industry. Like there needs to be much more awesome, young, talented, entry-level people coming to space, and that's what we're for. For everyone else, like, you don't need to take the test if you're already an esports person.
Yeah.
You're living the dream. This is not for you.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry that we didn't communicate that clearly enough, right? So that's sort of the TLDR.
In very simple language, who is it for?
I would say it's like, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. So it seems like the age range that we've looked at is roughly about like 18 to about 24 is like one of the sweet spots there. There's another contingency that we've seen in sort of like talking and sort of the research we did, which was there are some people who are later on, like someone who's like a middle level, like senior sales manager, right? They might be in their like early 30s or mid 30s. They love esports. They think it's the future. They want to be involved. And they're like, hey, like it's just really hard for them with all their obligations and with family and everything else for that person to then break in and like do all the things that you need to do as a salesperson. And so for that person, this might be a good fit to be like, hey, here's an easy way for me to get certified, show that I've actually done the research, that I know esports. Esports sales, as you know, is one of those things where you see some salespeople, and I'm sure you've hired people like this, and I've hired people like this, where they just don't get esports, and you're just like, what the heck? But they have all the sales experience, right? And so if we can find people who are like that type of sales level, but also understand esports, my goodness, that person is a dime, somewhere between a dinosaur, a diamond, and a unicorn in this space.
Can we talk about variance? So one of the main issues that I brought up in my original talk, which is going up after this, is that I don't. There's such a vast list, right, of roles within esports. So everything like you just mentioned, from sales to team development to accountants to psychological supports. How do you create a certification, or how do you address going forward? Since I know you have, I'm giving you the benefit of doubt of having an MVP right now. But let's say, how do you answer that issue of like going forward? You've got 7, 8, 9, 10 different roles that are completely different within esports of like verifying that people know that. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so this is one of those like fun questions where I think a lot of people would love to, say like, oh, like we have all these ideas and everything's going to work out and these things are super awesome and etc. And the honest answer is we'll find out. We'll find out as we work through it, right? Like we know that this works, and we believe this works for entry-level business roles, right? Your typical fairly opaque roles in sales, in finance at the entry level, stuff like that, right? Like we know that that's what this is for, and that this will be great for that. We don't know if this is going to be, or we know for a fact this is not for PTs, for example. Like if you're a physical therapist, like that's not for you.
Yeah.
We know it's not for these people. Can we help those guys and gals and non-binary pals someday? Perhaps. Our goal is just to make sure we fix this up part of the funnel first, and then if we can get this right, and then we know it works, then we can start growing and expanding to other verticals for sure.
Got it. I know you're light on time, so is there anything else that you would really want to get out there, or that you want to talk about that I might have left out?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I know this is going to sound hollow to some people, but honestly, I read everything, right? I read all the feedback. I read all the messages. Devin and I were talking earlier about how, like, I didn't receive any death threats yesterday, which is a massive plus relative to the usual announcements I've done in esports, right? Like between any of the stuff,
never change,
right? Like player benchings or like us not making playoffs and whatnot. Like those responses are far worse, and I'm so grateful for the thoughtful discourse. There are so many people with really good context and really good feedback. I may not agree with you. And I think I may not agree with a lot of you, and not a lot of you in the majority, but I not agree with a lot of people on the basis that I think progress is better than perfection. Like I don't want perfect to be enemy of good. And that's just a philosophy I've always held. And so, I appreciate everyone taking the time and taking a critical eye on this. Like that's really important to do. And I appreciate reaching out. And unfortunately, I'm not getting to everyone. So I usually, even in the past, try to respond to anything anyone said, but just know that like no matter what you send or what you DM or what you message me, like I'm seeing it, I'm reading it. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being here, man. I mean, I really do feel like you are on the right track. I'm really impressed by the team that you've assembled, most of all. But I also I've known you before, but like in talking to you now, and understanding your vision of ECI, I really do support it going forward. And I really hope that it provides the opportunity to people who, like you said, the unseen people, the people that have, who I think it's targeting, the people that have really great difficulty getting a leg up and maybe not being as lucky as we were 8 years ago to get into this. I really hope that you give them visibility and that you get those people to work in such a fantastic industry.
Dude, I goddamn hope so too.
Yeah.
Right. Like, this is and that's the beauty of this. You put together a group of people you really think are trying to do good for the space. You put together another group of people to make sure that group of people doesn't stray from the path. And then you cross your fingers, you put your head down, and you just get to work.
Yeah. Yeah, good stuff, man. Thank you for this. Like, this is cool. I think I'm going to be doing more work. I want to actually take the test. I think that's what I'm going to do next.
Oh, please, man.
Yeah. We'll see how, not the statistical data one. I'm going to get 0 out of
Look, all I'm saying, man, is it will help with understanding Twitter data and Twitch data. The number of people who, and you saw this with salespeople, like the people who are coming in and be like, yo, this streamer is big. And you're like,
Yeah.
these numbers make no sense. How do they have 10 million followers, but only like 100 average concurrent viewers?
Yeah.
Do you understand how unlikely or not okay this is, right? Like this is, like, you need to get better at this, salesperson.
100%, yeah, or at least, I mean, what I would say is like understanding why those metrics are important, right?
Right,
like, yeah,
right. So that's a retool. That's on us. Sorry about that, guys. We're it's a work in progress, but we'll have it ready to go.
It's all good. Well, I know you got to get going, right?
Yeah, I got to jump off, unfortunately. But
Okay.
Thanks a bunch for your time, man.
Thank you for yours, and I really appreciate you coming on for this. Like, we'll put this up on YouTube and everything, and it'll be a whole thing. And if there's anything else like you want to come back on later, like maybe we do like a 6-month thing, 3-month thing, see like where it's going. When sort of the fire dies down and everything's like, yeah, and I'd be really curious as to your direction, because I'm actually invested in this like philosophically. So like I'd love to hear where you're going. And if you need anything,
sure,
also reach out to me.
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate the time, and thanks to everyone for listening in.
100%. Thank you.
Cheers.
All right. Talk soon. Cool. Sebastian Park. Let's go.